So, the breath. One thing that really is not understood in current mainstream medicine and health is the importance of the breath. I would say it's even a higher level than the importance of food, over and above obviously survival food needs. It's probably more important than sleep. So if you're talking about the basic needs of an organism for health, then there is a great deal within the breath. Also, exercise. Exercise is another thing that people talk about as being the basis of health, maybe food and exercise. The breath is very, very important. I would say also emotional mastery is very important, and some of the most insightful philosophies which talk about the nature of the breath will also combine this with emotional mastery. One of the most important of these being what's called witness consciousness, which is sometimes known as Tantra or Tantric Yoga, and this is something which combines this. It's a little bit more advanced, it's a specific technique, but I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the breath and why the breath is so important for health, and also what kind of breath I believe to be most important. The kind of breath I think is most important is described by Dr. L. Wilson, and it's called pushing down, and it's a system of breathing where you're actually breathing down through your body, and the way I found this easiest to experience is through concentrating on breathing my breath down into my toes to feel tingling in my toes, and then you continue down through Mother Earth in your imagination. When you're talking about the breath and controlling the breath, the imagination is incredibly important. In fact, the imagination is equally important to health as the breath. So this breathing down exercise was developed from Roy Master's meditation, and it links into what I mentioned in a previous video about witness consciousness, because this kind of breathing enables one to balance the emotional and physical aspects of the body, whilst at the same time developing a kind of almost feeling of watching your own body. But there's no element of hypnosis. One of the issues with a lot of meditation, particularly meditation that use repeated words or use recorded material, is that it's a kind of hypnosis, and one of the dangers with that is that the person is not getting directly in contact with their own being, and also their own being's relationship to other or to the environment. And it's through this process of getting in contact with your own being and your own being in relationship to other that one can actually complete the Trinity, if you like, the co-creation, which is the sense of oneness and being amongst the other. That's one very important reason why this breathing exercise is good, Another important reason why this exercise of always breathing down is very good is because the type of chemicals which are in the environment, they're in the genetically modified foods, they're sprayed onto the crops, they're in the weed killers, they're also increasingly put into the skies for various military operations, and they're in the vaccinations, and they're in the cleaning products and the toiletry products that we use. Now these type of chemicals, as Dr. Wilson describes, are very yin, and by that they're quite likely to cause estrogenic effects. And one of the things about these effects is that they cause, according to Dr. Wilson, which I can understand, a kind of up energy. Now, my mother used to suffer a little bit from depression and anxiety, and when she was feeling like that, she would always say, "I feel uppity," and I know exactly what she means. And when you feel like that, there is a feeling that the energy is coming up, and so that is why this down energy is very, very important, because it's actually linking us down into our navel, which is a very important part in the Eastern philosophies, things like Tai Chi and Qigong. And it's also linking us down towards Mother Earth, which has a very, very grounding effect, and it counteracts a lot of the toxic effects which are in the environment at the moment. In the Eastern philosophy, the breath is called the Qi, and I just want to say, if you specifically want to practice the exercise I've described, that is in another video on my channel as well, so I'm going to talk more generally. So in Eastern philosophy they call the breath the Qi, and this is actually another word for life force. And basically, once you become aware and in touch with the Qi, it enables you to control and have a sense of mastery over your own health, also over your spiritual connection to life, to nature, to the wider consciousness. You gain a sense of oneness, of beyond yourself, and actually that's a huge source of nourishment and a huge source of health and vitality once you learn to open up to that. Some people also talk about this as being source or God or consciousness. That's just another way of talking about this phenomena, which begins with experimenting and listening to your own body. So I think the essence of this discussion is really to emphasize the importance of grounding the self, which I think of as being the navel. That's the center of the person where the balance is occurring, and if you think of the breath as coming from here and going all the way down, then the navel is kind of in the middle, and you could almost see that as being a little dot that's moving and balancing between these two poles, which is balancing the individual. What they talk about, the higher states of consciousness, when people do various different types of meditation, it's all fine and it all has its role, but everything begins from the balance and the stability of where those physical, emotional and spiritual aspects of a person converge, and that's always the basis which keeps us grounded in the physical, from which we can ascend to all of those different levels. Once you really become aware of the chi and you start to watch the breath within your body, observe the breath within your body, and again this is linked to the witness consciousness, you have a dual sensation that the breath is separate to you and the breath is also you. And again, the same method that I talked about before occurs, in that you experience the separateness, and through that you can actually come to a state of awareness where you see how those intersect and, if you like, become one. But the other important thing is, once you become aware of the breath as a separate thing, you can actually move the breath up and down your body, you can control the breath. Even in conventional science, there's been a lot of research that things like cancers, things like illnesses, are to do with the lack of oxygen in the cells. Oxygen, chi is not called the breath of life for nothing, because it's that gives you life. So if you can start to have an awareness and consciously work with your breath as something, a tool that can serve you, then you have an enormous gateway and a key towards a whole new dimension of understanding your body. And there are lots of other aspects as well which are to do with the imagination, because there's a huge area in which the breath again is connecting you to the environment and to the cosmos. And so by becoming aware of this and becoming aware of the duality between your separate being and the cosmos and the interaction between those two, you gain a huge level of insight into the way that you can become part of that. And that's really where this whole spiritual journey begins. And at the same time, by visualizing certain positive things and using that with the breath, you can actually use this tool in all sorts of interesting and exciting ways, which really open the doors to a whole world of healthy exploration.